Hello everyone, this is update for February 24, 2024, day 731 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for February 23 and February 22. I'm going to start today with a general update, and it's going to be about Ukraine, and it's going to be about corruption in Ukraine, white-collar corruption that's tied up to very highest level of Ukrainian government, to Ukrainian prime minister. You can be implicated, probably Ukrainian president, because the Ukrainian prime minister, he's appointee, obviously, and because he controls the parliament in Ukraine. So we're just going to explain one example of the government-sanctioned looting of Ukrainian public finances. So Ukraine has about 38.5 billion in FX reserves, basically US dollars, held at Ukrainian National Bank. And obviously a lot of it is coming through help from the West, right? So the West, all countries from the West, European Union, US, Japan, they help Ukraine financially. All of that money goes and basically stays with the sort of fiduciary for that money is Central Bank of Ukraine. It's called National Bank of Ukraine. Then you have some corrupt large businesses in Ukraine, and this is three of those, and allegedly, this, I'm not a court, so it's not, let's say, official statement. This is opinion, obviously, and so this businesses, as you can see, three businesses, they are owned by the what Ukraine called oligarchs, that effectively are shareholders of the Ukrainian president. Effectively, one of the main ones, probably more, but it's obvious that these are the main major stockholders in Ukrainian president. And so, what they want to in Ukraine at this moment. No business can transfer money abroad, specifically if this is a transfer of capital out of Ukraine. So obviously for obvious reasons, because Ukraine is at war, there's a shortage of foreign currency and so on. That situation, I would say, is that approach is actually wrong. But let's say this is official explanation, right? So I'm just taking it at the face value. Nobody's allowed to transfer money outside of Ukraine, even ordinary Ukrainian citizens. I don't believe there is. I don't think you can transfer pretty much anything at all out of Ukraine. So, however, these three oligarchs, they feeling that things are not going well in Ukraine, and they want to pull capital out of Ukraine. So they have large businesses in Ukraine. One is steel pipe making company. This is called Interpipe. Then there is another one, that Metinvest, that also produces steel, coal and so on. There's also power generation. Actually, they also have so-called green energy investments, which is typical, is very corrupt scheme in Ukraine. And then there's another one, third one, that's focused on agriculture, and specifically they focused on sunflower oil. It's called Kernel. So basically, these three oligarchs decide to pull some of their capital out of Ukraine, just in case if Ukraine as a country fails. so they can minimize their losses. Basically, that's their logic. So what they do, they request Ukrainian Prime Minister to approve that pool as exception, right? So nobody, no other business, no sort of ordinary business has ability to do that. Only sort of special select businesses can do that. So the Ukrainian Prime Minister approves that pool, which is roughly together 1.8 billion US dollars. So as you can see, it's roughly 2 billion out of 38.5, and this is in a time of dwindling Ukrainian FX reserves, because Ukraine is receiving a lot less in the financial aid from the West. So this is, every euro, every US dollar are super precious at this moment. So this moment they decide to pull this money out. The Prime Minister approves it. Central Bank is about to do that, approves it as well, and is about to do it. This whole, I would say, white collar crime was stopped at the last second with actually IMF, because IMF is considering lending money to Ukrainian government, and obviously money will be deposited with Ukrainian Central Bank. Again, this is National Bank of Ukraine, is the Central Bank of Ukraine, and so they issue a letter asking to stop these transactions. So it was stopped, intercepted last second, but how many of these transactions happened, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised that this has been sort of regular scheme of how to siphon money, and a lot of it is West money, and also it's also, Ukrainian citizens' money, because it's a public finances for the benefit of essentially three oligarchs who effectively controlled the control Ukrainian government, including Ukrainian Prime Minister and Ukrainian President, obviously Parliament, obviously Central Bank of Ukraine. So this is just example how things working, and why Ukraine has problems generally in all aspects, because this kind of behavior, it's all starts at the top. And if you have, as they say, the fish always starts rotting from the top, and this is exactly example of that situation. Now let's switch to the situation on the battlefield. General assessment of the situation is pretty grim for Ukraine. The front line starting to collapse in more visible fashion. Ukrainian forces over this past 3 days lost, I think, 4 villages, which is very unusual. It sounds like not much, but given that Ukrainian forces would not lose anything for a really long time, and actually would liberate some territories, this is a very clear negative trend. And as I mentioned before, this situation is going to get only worse, and probably going to get worse in exponential fashion. So I would say, thinking about the situation in linear fashion would be extremely wrong, and absolutely, I would say, delusional. And example of how this is actually happening was actually explained by the Ukrainian political top, basically the aides of Ukrainian president. So as I mentioned before, Ukrainian army is about 900,000 strong, people strong, versus Russian army in Ukraine about 600,000 people. So you would think that Ukrainian forces should outnumber Russian forces on on a battlefield, but that's not the case. And the reason, because a lot of those, majority actually of those people are somewhere unaccounted in the rear, and like not just in the immediate rear, but like 50-100 kilometers in basically very safe rear, or even in Kiev. And for example, just by the headquarters or general staff, there were unaccounted 8,000 people. That's just what is officially stated by Ukraine, by one of the representative of Ukrainian government. So it just gives you, and this is just a tip of the iceberg, give you the nature of the problem, the nature of the corruption, because obviously these people should not be, it's essentially two brigades unaccounted of people unaccounted by the general headquarters or general staff. So you can only imagine that this is happening at every single level of the command, and that's why really the numbers on the battlefield roughly is 300,000 people. So effectively, like 600,000 people, nominally they are in the army, but they're not anywhere close to the battlefield. They're not contributing to the war effort, because for the most part they're not getting any training, and yet they consume a lot of resources. So this is just another symptom of the problems and complete mismanagement in Ukraine as a system. And so what you have as a result in one of those examples is, you may have seen examples where, one Ukrainian soldier fights 10 Russian soldiers, and, he is a hero, he is successful, he fights them back. And then there was another example of like 4 Ukrainian soldiers defending against like 20 plus Russian soldiers, and they're successful. So what you end up having is that Ukrainian soldiers have to be heroes, and there's another additional layer, that the reason this 1 in 4 soldiers are heroes is because other soldiers in their detachments decided not to actually be on the front line, and they are somewhere in the immediate rear because they just refuse to fight. And the reason they refuse to fight, because they see the 600,000 other people who are nominally in the army, but they know nowhere to be seen, and they see this rot at the top in Ukraine, and they don't feel like they want to sacrifice. And this is the nature of the problem, why Ukrainian forces starting to the Ukrainian defenses are starting to crumble. Not because of the shortage of the ammunition, not because of the shortage of Western help. There is no true acute shortage at this moment, because if we really compare apples to apples, Russian side is also not does not have plenty of artillery shells or artillery ammunition. They have enough, but barely enough to get by. That's why they're relying more on these gliding bombs. They even more relying on multiple rocket launchers and things like that. They also trying to, to compensate for the shortage of artillery shells. They don't produce that much. They definitely don't produce enough for the war effort that they going through. And even what they got from North Korea and potentially other places, it's in Iran, it's simply not enough. Not to mention that there is widespread, view is that North Korean shells are of lower quality, and that could be explained because they are like from the 80s. Manufacturing date is typically, most of them are 80s. So North Korea is also getting rid of old stuff. This is the same is happening with Ukraine. Ukraine is getting also old stuff from the inventory in the West, and in some ways it's natural. If you don't produce, you're getting not the best quality material, and both sides are facing the same situation. So going back to this whole situation is the Ukrainian defense problem is really deeply rooted in the problem in the country that majority of people are not seeing what's in it for them. They see this, endemic corruption at the Ukrainian top, and they don't feel like they want to, sacrifice their lives. And people who want it, they already did that, and unfortunately, they gone. Majority of them gone, and so at this point, there are more sort of practical people left who ask the question, what's in it for me? And there's nothing for them in it, and that's a reality. And that's why things gonna get much worse, because current Ukrainian government, political top, they have no plans to change. They simply cannot do it. It's just not in their DNA. They don't understand how to sort of live different way. So and this is the start of the problems for Ukraine. How this is going to play out or remains to be seen, but their results could be truly catastrophic. Going back a little bit to Russia, what Russia is actually trying to do, there is rumors that on the 28th, Russia is going to actually annex this Transnistria region. And basically, what's going to happen there is that local Transnistria parliament will ask to join Russia, and obviously Russian government will say, yep, you're going to be part of Russia, and so this is going to be Russian territory from Russian perspective. Obviously this is goes against any international agreement and so on, but at this point all of the international agreements are thrown out the window by Russia in this war. So this is going to be sort of another sort of source of tension. It's possible that this is just rumors. We'll see what happens there. But it's very clear that situation generally getting more confrontational, more intense between Russia and the West. Like, for example, there were news in Russia that Russia blocked access to certain ocean territorial zone that belongs to Russia to basically they blocked the British fishers from accessing that territories, and also something similar was going on with the U.S. So there's very clear intensification of the conflict, and then also Russia is threatening that it's going to renounce agreement, a 1990 agreement that laid foundation for the reunification of Germany. It's called 4+2 agreement. Basically, it was agreement between former World War II allies and two German states that they, former allies, okay, with German states to reunifying into one country. And effectively, Russia now is trying to say, okay, well, we're not, we're pulling out of that agreement. We're no longer recognizing unified Germany. We're basically now going back to Germany split into Eastern and Western. So this is what's Russian political top doing on international affairs. This is not official. This is just sort of threats of that. Nobody's, obviously everybody understands Germany is reunified, nothing's going to change, but it's obviously very sort of embarrassing situation from an international perspective for Germany and for the West in general. So as you can see, Russian political top is doing everything possible to basically irritate West and mock West, let's put it this way. Now I'm gonna switch to actually walk through the battlefield. So I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do it, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. There is no imminent or short-term chances of Russian invasion. Things remain more or less the same. Now let's move to the North Donbass front. North Lugansk front line. This section of the front line is actually fairly quiet. My take on this is that Russian, as I said before, Russian command does not have enough resources to to execute attacks on multiple sections of the front line. So they have limited resources, and this is obviously not the most important. This is probably one of the least important sections of the front line for both Russia and Ukraine. So it's kind of like in some ways dead end. So if they need resources somewhere else, which they do because they have some initial successes in other areas, which I will go through, and so they want to throw resources where they have successes as opposed to area where they did not have true real successes here. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. So northern sector is quiet as it normally is. In the southern, Russian troops are advancing. They are in process of capturing this village Ivanyivske. Again, definitely not a positive sign for Ukrainian defenses, and as I said, it's a sign of the crumbling of Ukrainian front line, basically. Now let's move south. Let's look at what's going on at the central Donbass front line. Things here also going pretty bad for Ukrainian side. Ukrainian forces lost near, basically west of Avdiyivka, 3 villages. One is Stepove, Lastochkyne, and Pivnichne. So basically, this is the defensive line that I mentioned before, where there was a hope that Ukrainian forces will be able to sort of stop Russian advance, and they did not manage to stop. So Ukrainian forces lost all of those 3 villages, and so Russian troops are continuing their advance here, and that's why I'm saying that Russian command is probably pulling all of the resources on all of its weight where it works, and it works for now here. So there probably will be even more pressure, or at least there will be attempts of more pressure in this area, because there is not a small chance that Russian forces can make actual true penetration of Ukrainian defenses and actually turn this into a much larger scale problem for Ukrainian forces. It's not anywhere close to that yet, but this is at this point, this is not a zero chance of that happening. Then if we move a little bit south around the Marinka area, so Russian forces, as I mentioned before, captured village Peremoga. They also in process of capturing this small town Novomikhailivka. So this is probably going to take some time, but again, this is in process of being lost by Ukrainian forces. So as you can see, that it's negative news essentially across entire this central Donbass front line. This is where the Russian command is probably putting the most pressure, and where this is where Ukrainian defenses are truly cracking, and hopefully it's not going to be like the dam is going to fall and there will be flood of Russian troops basically heading towards immediate goals, for example, be Pokrovsk and basically Kurakhove at this point. So those are 2 main goals, but eventually the goal is to get to the border of the Donetsk region and then move west towards Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro. So this is real risk, not immediate one, but medium term for sure for Ukraine. Now let's move to the Zaporizhzhia front line. Things here also not going well. Ukrainian forces essentially lost this village Robotyne that costed so many lives and so many resources in the summer. Is effectively Ukrainian forces are in the process of losing all of those gains, which are very small anyways, but nevertheless all of those gains that were paid for dearly are effectively being lost as sort of as I speak, and in probably in coming days. Otherwise, the rest of it is fairly quiet. And again, as you can see, uh, the biggest threat is actually for this large city Zaporizhya. It's important city. It's quite a bit of it's industrial center. So the loss of this place would be devastating for Ukraine. I'm not saying this is happening right now, but it's very clear that the goal here in all of this pressure and Russian attacks is eventually Zaporizhia. Now let's move to the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here remain more or less the same. Russian troops are not able to destroy Ukrainian bridgehead. It remains there. Status quo remains there. But as I said before, at this point, this bridgehead is more of a liability rather than asset for Ukrainian forces, unless obviously Ukrainian command is capable of doing any kind of offensive operation, and Ukrainian actually troops can execute that, but none of that is actually true. Otherwise, it would have been excellent asset and opportunity for Ukrainian side. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.